It shouldn't come as a surprise that Global Guardian, a mass Armageddon drill, was in full swing. The drill would pose all sorts of threats, and even mobilize command centers known as Doomsday Planes that housed top military personnel. Although originally scheduled for late October, it was moved up unexpectedly. One of these Doomsday Planes was on the scene of the Pentagon strike.
Now to one of the eeriest moments amid the carnage of 9/11, a mysterious plane was seen flying right over the president's residence. Even some CNN staffers saw it. To this day, it has never been officially explained. Tonight, Chief National Correspondent John King has new details about this great 9/11 mystery.
Today, 6 years after 9/11, the mystery endures about just what happened in the skies over the White House that terrible day. A plane flew right over it. But why? And what was it? It appeared overhead just before 10 a.m., a four-engine jet banking slowly in the nation's most off-limits airspace.
About 10 minutes ago, there was a white jet circling overhead. Now, you generally don't see planes in the area over the White House. That is restricted airspace.
Two government sources familiar with the incident tell CNN it was a military aircraft, but say the details are classified. This comparison of the CNN video and an official Air Force photo suggests the mystery plane is among the military's most sensitive aircraft, an Air Force E-4B. Note the flag on the tail, the stripe around the fuselage, and the telltale bubble just behind the 747 cockpit area. The E-4B is a state-of-the-art flying command post, built and equipped for one reason: to keep the government running no matter what, even in the event of a nuclear war. The reason it was nicknamed the Doomsday Plane during the Cold War.
They exercise this type of thing all of the time, and they simply don't talk about it. So it doesn't surprise me that they are very closed-mouthed about it.
Ask the Pentagon, and it insists this is not a military aircraft, and there is no mention of it in the official report of the 9/11 Commission. But 6 years later, the Pentagon, the Secret Service, and the FAA all say they, at least for public consumption, have no explanation of the giant plane over the president's house, just as the smoke began to rise across the river at the Pentagon.
There is also footage of another white mystery plane in the restricted airspace over New York City before the second attack, and as the second plane strikes the World Trade Center. There were 5 E-4Bs in the air on 9/11. They are part of the continuity of government plans in case of an emergency. This program was launched in the early 80s, headed by none other than George Herbert Walker Bush.
Was being made to consolidate continuity of government programs across several major departments of the government under one office, which turned out later to be called the National Program Office. As I understood it, this office fell under the jurisdiction of the Office of the Vice President.
Then Vice President George Bush was the first in charge.
On 9/11, this program was put into effect.
This next one happens a lot these days. It seems like a story that is both reassuring and scary at the same time. This morning we learned that the Vice President wasn't the only one sent to an undisclosed location on September 11th, that an entire backup government was and is still there and may be there for as long as anyone now at least can imagine.
Traveling in Iowa, the president for the first time discussed a secret ongoing operation designed to keep the federal government running if Washington is paralyzed by a terrorist strike.
I still take the threats that we receive from Al-Qaeda killers and terrorists very seriously.
The operation was first reported by the Washington Post and confirmed to CNN by several administration officials. The shadow or bunker government involves roughly 100 senior staffers from every cabinet department and major government agency. Operates primarily out of 2 secret bunkers in the eastern United States, and is charged with running the executive branch if communication with Washington is severed. The secret plan took shape in the minutes and hours after the September 11th strikes, as Mr. Bush took a cautious route back to Washington. And now, nearly 6 months later, administration officials are scrambling to get more telephone lines and high-tech computers into these secret bunkers, and at least one member of the Bush cabinet is being kept out of Washington at all times, under heavy security, just in case this so-called shadow government is activated and needs a leader.
Despite it being on television and in numerous papers, most people continue to deny that a shadow government even exists. Now what if I told you that Dick Cheney was the reported head of this group on the day of 9/11? President Bush cracked jokes about it at a prime rib dinner. The vice president has been moving among secret locations to provide continuity of government. A year ago, Dick was running the country, Bush said. Today, he lives out of a little suitcase. Cheney has been part of the succession program since its inception.
To reduce the possibility of decapitation, the National Program Office was directed to create a new program to assure the continuity of government. It was known as the Presidential Successor Support System, or PSQ. Dick Cheney, Edwin Meese, Tip O'Neill, and Dick Thornburg all have been in the line of succession by virtue of their offices, but our sources say the NPO gave them additional responsibilities under the new system.
Cheney would arrive at the emergency center before the Pentagon was attacked.
Shortly after 9:30 a.m., the president's national security team is in the Situation Room, a secure communications center in the basement of the West Wing. Vice President Dick Cheney is there, along with National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice.
I arrived at the PIOC at about 9:20 a.m. I was made aware of it during the time that the airplane coming in to the Pentagon. There was a young man who would come in and say to the vice president, the plane is 50 miles out, the plane is 30 miles out. And when it got down to the plane is 10 miles out, the young man also said to the vice president, do the orders still stand? And the vice president turned and whipped his neck around and said, of course the orders still stand. Have you heard anything to the contrary? The flight that came into the Pentagon.
Yeah. When you arrived at 9:20, how much longer was it before you overheard the conversation between the young man and the vice president saying, does the order still stand?
It's probably about 5 or 6 minutes.
So about 9:25 or 9:26.
The 9/11 Commission would cover this up by saying Cheney did not arrive in the Emergency Operating Center until more than 15 minutes after the Pentagon strike. Many of the same people involved in the shadow government benefited the most from the war on terror.